Hello, and I have the privilege today of interviewing Jem Bunce. He is one of the latest Sputnik grant recipients, and we're going to hear from him today. So, Jem, can you introduce yourself? Who are you, and what do you do?
My name is Jeremy, known as Jem. I live in beautiful Cornwall, which is, may I say, extremely sunny right now. I've got 4 sisters, no brothers, 5 daughters, no sons. That's a good line. So you leave you to just think about that. We live now. My wife and I, all my daughters, my wife, she's doing a fine art degree. They're all creative. So always every area of our house is covered with bits of drawings and prints, and that has always been the case. Although it's just me and Deb now who live here. I'm an odd jobber and an artist.
Perfect. All right. Well, can you tell us then from there a bit about the project that you're about to undertake?
A friend of mine a couple of years ago said, Jeremy, can you take 6 weeks off to go sailing? I went, no, I can't, John. I can't. But I could possibly do 2 weeks. And then it got cancelled last year's trip. But then it's back on. And we're going to be sailing around the Hebrides, Inner and Outer Hebrides. And I'm just going to take my sketchbook. I'm just going to draw. I might do some monoprints. And the idea is that when I do any drawings, I just don't really know quite where it's going, but I'm just going to record not just places I see, but my experience through my drawings and prints or whatever else I do, and then get back with all this kind of piles of pieces of paper, and then maybe do some more prints, a print series, possibly some paintings, kind of from that. So it's a sort of an experience which I will record visually.
Yeah, that sounds very exciting and brilliant.
And an incredibly beautiful place, apparently. I mean, like crazy.
Yeah, totally beautiful and very remote.
Well, yes, very remote. I mean, the plan is, and I mean, I'm a bit nervous about this because apparently anyone who sails to this place just gets violently ill. And I'm a bit nervous about seasickness anyway. So John said, oh, you'll be fine. But the plan is that we might, if we can, and the weather's okay, we're going to go to this remote island. Like there's the inner Hebrides, and there's the outer Hebrides, and then there's just like ocean. And you just go into the ocean for 50 miles. And then there's this tiny group of islands called St Kilda, which is now the population left because they thought it was too remote and too difficult to live there in 1930. And we're just going to visit there. We have 400-foot cliffs, 400-meter high cliffs, second highest in Europe, and biggest birds population in, well, pretty much anywhere. Puffins everywhere. I've never seen a puffin. So we're hoping to go to St Kilda as part of it as well, which would be quite dramatic. And just the journey there could be quite an adventure. Whether I'm in any fit state to draw, I don't know, but that's the plan.
Maybe it'll be a new form of drawing. I love that.
Yes, I know. Yeah, fine boggles, doesn't it?
So I know that your work often begins with like sketching on location, like that's part of your practice. What particularly, I suppose, drew you to the Scottish Isles for doing that, and for doing it on a boat, and the fact that it's going to be probably quite extreme weather conditions? Yeah, what drew you to wanting to say yes?
Well, I mean, we live in a kind of remote-ish sort of part of the country anyway, Cornwall, which is absolutely beautiful. Anyone who's been there, will know that. And we live actually really in a quite sort of beautiful bit of Cornwall, right smack in the middle right now. North coast and south coast are very different, but they're all very easy accessible to us because we're in the middle. And they're both different, but utterly beautiful. And I kind of think that having lived in towns, I've lived a bit in London and various places, there's something about when you're in a more remote place, it's like you become smaller because everything else is bigger around you. The sky seems bigger, the landscape seems bigger. So there's something about your connection and your understanding of what you see, but also of yourself when you're in that kind of environment. So, I mean, the inner and outer Hebrides, and maybe St Kilda as well, will like be that on steroids. I mean, it'll be like just like, whoa, big. And everyone who's been there, which I haven't, will tell you it's stunningly beautiful. So I think in some ways the subject matter is kind of as much me and the experience of being there, what actually happens at the time. You know, what I'm thinking at the time is it recorded in my, even subconsciously in my drawings or paintings. And so that in itself becomes the subject matter, which I wouldn't necessarily know until I get there.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that totally does. I'm interested in, so you are going to sketch out on location and then bring that all back to the studio. Do you find that, I mean, especially I imagine sketching in such a beautiful place, and secondly, in potentially quite different circumstances for you. You're going to be out on the open water. You might not have a still day in sight. Do you think something happens in your sketchbooks with the kind of physicality of the place that you're sketching in that changes then when you get to the studio, when you bring it back to the calm?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I make it more difficult for me, or arguably easier, because I set myself targets to say, I'm going to draw this or in 5 minutes or 2 minutes, or I'm going to do 5 drawings in 25 minutes or something like that. And I don't have time to think. So I'm literally going like this and just next, whatever. And I then, and there are decisions that I am making, but I'm not generally looking and going, oh, right, I've got to get that branch of that tree just like, you know, I am looking at the tree or whatever it is, the mountain or the whatever, but I am kind of sort of like, when I do the drawings, they are often, time restraint is a really good thing for me because I don't have time so much to think. And so I'm making intuitive, quick marks. And then the sketchbook will lie closed for a few weeks or even months. And then I'll look at a drawing that I've made, often with no idea other than just I did a drawing that day. I didn't really have a plan to make it into a painting or anything like that. But then I will just kind of react to that drawing, and it's as much to do with the kind of mark. So like, for example, when I was in the Far East it was the 6th of January 2019, I just did this drawing, which was sitting on a balcony. This was actually like the most beautiful place called Luang Prabang. And it's like really done. I did it in 15 minutes, and it's literally just starting my sketchbook. And very quick, big sort of soft pencil. But a year or so later, I sort of turned that into kind of painting about this kind of sort of size, which my mate bought, which was just like great. And then subsequently from that, I've made a whole series of prints from that, but I wasn't thinking of that at the time when I was sitting on this rather nice balcony overlooking the Nam Can River with my flat white and they do some really nice pastries. I mean, I was living in luxury at that moment. I mean, it was great. But my experiences of the country of Laos where I was, my feelings about the place and things I'd heard the day before, which I then reflected more into the painting. I wasn't consciously thinking about it in the drawing, then sort of became part of it and my experience about the place into the painting. So it's an open-ended journey when you start out on a drawing, and I kind of like that. I don't like to be too ideal, like I'm just going to go to A to B, and then I'll just do B really nicely and it'll be lovely and it will look exactly like the place that I was at when I was in A. I'm not interested so much in that, although that's a totally legitimate thing to do, of course.
This sounds great. I love the idea that actually you don't know what's going to come out the other end, but maybe all of that speed sketching is preparing you for speed sketching in between feeling a bit nauseous.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like brilliant. You're supposed to be looking at the horizon. So I won't be looking at a sketchbook.
It'd be great. So there's a really small crew of you going, isn't there? There's only like 5 of you. And so I imagine you were talking before about kind of isolation. This is like extreme isolation.
Well, it is, except it's a smallish yacht, so we could be quite close, actually.
All right, okay. Isolated, but with a small view. In terms of like art and faith, where does that come in for you? Like, is that part of your process of painting? Is that just who you are? You know, are you expecting to be bowled over, I suppose, by creation?
Well, yes. I mean, even when I went to art college back in the 80s, and I don't know that I did very much that was particularly interesting at the time, but always been this kind of very simple sort of kind of thinking is that, yeah, the creation is just speaks as like God is just like utterly amazing. He's just totally extravagant. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, everyone says that if we get to St Kilda, our jaws will just be like, oh. I mean, it's possibly going to be the most stunning thing I've ever seen in my life. But the fact is that it's just that the simple thing is that God is just this extraordinary creator with just like everything is just completely crazy and intricate and diverse, and then he says, I want you to create as well. And I mean, I don't just feel that means we just like copy what he's done. There's something about the fact that we've got something of his creative kind of nature in us, so we are then get the chance to create ourselves. That might be a film, or it might be a book, or it might be a novel, or it might be a painting or print or drawing or whatever. But it's just that in itself is legitimate reason for being, because we're just reflecting something of who we are and how the way God has made us. So at the very basic, that's what I think my faith is. I mean, the other thing is that I find drawing and painting sometimes, well, no, say sometimes, like always, really hard. So there's a sense where I'd go into it with, I know it sounds a bit over the top, but it isn't. Actually, I genuinely go in and say, God, will you help me? And I think there's something about the sense of also, I will be, if I'm sitting on my boat looking at these 400-meter cliffs at St Kilda, I can talk to the person who made it. And that's like crazy. And so it's sort of like not something out there. It's like I have a relationship with the person who actually like created this, and it makes me think, wow. And I know what I'm going to do, whatever it looks like a cliff from St Kilda or whatever. Do you know what I mean? These marks on a piece of paper in a sketchbook or whatever. There's something of a kind of like, there is that sort of amazing connection with the person who is the creator, and that informs my work in a very sort of, I think that's just like glorious sort of sense of connection.
That is so beautifully put. I honestly am more excited I was pretty excited about your trip beforehand. Now I'm more excited than ever before. It seems like just a phenomenal opportunity, and I cannot wait to see what you produce and really, what story this starts to kind of unravel as you go on this journey. Is there any way that we can follow along?
But during the trip, if possible, I will be uploading even just simple pictures of just sort of so people could follow what I'm doing. And if I can write some stuff, and I hope to be able to do that, I'll put it on my blog as well. And then you could put it on that, presumably could get linked to with Sputnik site and whatever. So people could kind of get a bit of an experience as well.
Yeah,
and see
brilliant.
my green face.
No, you're going to love it. This is going to be sea legs and everything. Brilliant. Jem, thank you. That's amazing. I can't believe you're going. It's so exciting.